unless you want to spend years of your life, up to $400,000 annually, which is $2 million over 5 years. You'll have to deal with lawyers, compliance setbacks, legal issues, and worst of all, you have to find a landlord that's going to be cool enough to work with you through all this. Set up your licensing properly. Do not mess up when setting up your cannabis license. Do it properly or pay the price like I did. So here in California, we have a handful of licenses that you have to worry about. Starts with cultivation, then you're gonna have manufacturing. And there's 2 types of manufacturing licenses, type 6 and type 7. A type 6 manufacturing license means it's non-volatile. And that's where you're not using any gases or solvents that can explode. So type 7 is a volatile manufacturing license. And this is where butane hash is made, extractions for live resin, distillate. These are extraction types, manufacturing types that are using flammable ingredients, basically poisons in a sense, that they're using to strip the cannabinoids off the plant. And in doing so, you're not doing every step of the way properly. It's a very dangerous aspect. So with the type 7 licenses, they're gonna require a lot more fireproofing, a lot more protection. Type 7, you also have to get a C1D1 room, which is basically like a bomb-proof, explosion-proof room that you build inside of your warehouse. And these are thick metal walls that it also has a ventilation system built in. So if there is ever an explosion, what happens immediately is these huge fans suck out all the oxygen from the room almost instantaneously. And they do this for the safety. Because if you suck out all the oxygen immediately, you can't have an explosion. So these C1D1 rooms are massively expensive. So to own and operate a type 7 license, to even get it to operational before you're even operating, will cost you millions and millions of dollars. You need to spend on that C1D1 room. The facility's got to be engineered properly. You're gonna have to get inspections by all the different agencies. It's just, the list goes on. When you're building out a type 7, it's one of the most complex license types to deal with. So with a type 6 manufacturing license, the things you're gonna do with that license is different than a type 7 manufacturing license. A type 6, you're actually gonna be focused on packaging, pre-roll production, cartridge filling, as well as ice water extraction. And ice water extraction is how hash is made. And then from hash, you would press that to get hash rosin. So that all can be done at a type 6, mainly because the only extraction going on is with ice water, which obviously is not explosive. And then after that, you're just packaging products, filling carts. There's no extraction going on. The extraction already happened at the type 7. You bring that materials over to the type 6 and you can package it there. You can also do packaging under the type 7 as well. But a lot of times, unless it's a lab built out to do packaging and third-party fulfillment, most of the time the type 7 is really just gonna be focused on extraction. And then you would have those raw materials transferred to a type 6 or transferred to another manufacturer to get packaged. But everyone's setup's different. You might own the type 6, type 7, and it makes more sense to just package it yourself. So each case is different. Both these manufacturing licenses aren't super important, especially when you're starting your brand out. It only becomes important later down the road when you're really trying to scale your expenses down. And you can definitely save a lot of money by doing your own packaging. You have a lot more to deal with. And I say that because an average packaging cost is gonna be about anywhere from 80 cents to $1.20. Depending on how complex the packaging is, how many touch points there are. And when you break that down across a pound of weed, it's anywhere from about $100 a pound to $150 a pound. Now, if you were paying your own employees to do that, they could probably get it done for about at least half of that cost. There is a significant increase in cost by allowing a manufacturer to do it. However, what it reduces is the headaches, and the headaches of scheduling your employees, hiring your employees, motivating your employees, staying up to compliance with your facility that they're doing it at, versus you can just reach out, hit up a manufacturer you're working with, get your flower, your products transferred over there, drop off your packaging. They quote you on how much it's going to be. They do it, it's done. They transfer it to your distributor. So that's how I like to do it, especially in the beginning, because this extra overhead of owning the license, paying the rent where that license is at, dealing with the employees, scheduling the employees, making sure that that license now also has more bandwidth than what you're just providing, because you don't want those employees, they're not going to be consistent if you can't give them full-time work. So you actually got to now start getting new clients in there to max out the bandwidth of your license. And so now you start operating this license, and instead of focus on scaling your brand, you're now dealing with the license just so you could save a little bit of money on your brand. So this is why in the beginning, I highly recommend outsourcing your manufacturing. Don't worry about getting your cultivation license. Don't worry about getting your manufacturing license. And I spoke on this in another video, the extreme downside risk of owning a cultivation license. And the biggest reason why, especially nowadays, is your cost of goods is so low on flower. It's almost the cost it takes to produce if you own the grow. So this is the definition of a commodity. A commodity is where the market sets the price. The producer does not. So as a brand, brands are not commodities because the brand sets the price. And what the brand does is they leverage the commodities. They buy the commodity, they package it into a new product. Now they sell that product at an increased margin. And we've seen this happen our entire lives with coffee companies. You have Starbucks, you have Dunkin' Donuts, you have Pete's, pick your coffee company. They're buying coffee beans for pennies on the dollar, and coffee beans are actually traded on, whether it's the stock market or other markets, there's an actual index on coffee prices because it's a commodity. So just like with gold, silver, pork, milk, anything that's grown, corn, anything that's grown in massive amounts, it's basically supply and demand. There's so much supply that all these producers are dropping prices to make sure they sell it. And that's what's happening with weed right now. So to own a cultivation license, in my opinion, especially when you're starting a brand, is not necessary. And if anything, it's gonna hold you back a bit. So it's ideal, get your brand going, get sales under your belt, understand the nuances of operating your brand. And once you get to a certain level, that's when you want to start considering owning your own cultivation license. And the same goes with these manufacturing license. It may be more smart for you to get the cultivation license before the manufacturing license. Or you might find a situation where all the licenses are combined together. I just helped a friend of mine get connected to a license for sale where it was cultivation, a 5,000 square foot canopy, a type 6 manufacturing, and it also had a delivery service attached to it. So it's called a micro business license. And he's considering purchasing this license. However, the landlord's trying to hit him over the head with the rent. The landlord's charging $5 a square foot, which is ridiculous. And this is in downtown LA. And my license grow in downtown LA, we were paying $3.30 a square foot, which is still high. So for them to be charging $5 a square foot, I was blown away. I told the realtor, the landlord's got to be crazy. How is he asking $5 a square foot in a market like it is today? So we'll see what happens with my friend if he ends up getting that license, if he ends up renegotiating that rent with the landlord, or potentially moving that license to a different location, which is another headache. And it's almost as timely and costly as applying for a new license to just move a license. So the burden of a license, as they say, heavy is the head that wears the crown. So the more licenses you have, the heavier that burden's gonna be. And especially when you're starting your brand out, you don't wanna be burdened by a lot of this bullshit, the compliance, the unexpected stuff like robberies, employee issues, surprise inspections, potentially even getting shut down if you're out of compliance. So there's a lot of risks involved and a lot of focus is taken. Okay, so we touched on the cultivation license, the type 6 and the type 7 manufacturing license. Next one to focus on is the distro license. And this is a type 11 distribution license. And this allows you to operate as a licensed distributor and do a variety of functions. So first off, you're able to transport. And that's a key thing about a distributor. You can't, as a manufacturer, drive stuff around. You gotta have it transferred to a distributor, and then that distributor will drive stuff around. The other thing that the distributor does is they're allowed to do the compliance test on your finished goods, on your finished products. So the last distributor to touch the bulk product before they package it, they could do the compliance test in bulk. But if those finished packaged products get transferred to another distribution company, that last distribution company has to be the one to do the compliance test. You can't do a compliance test at one distro on the bulk flower and then transfer that bulk flower over to another distro and have that compliance test follow. You either need to package it all into the packaging and then transfer the packaged goods to another distro, or if you're sending that bulk pound that already had its compliance test done to it to another distro to package or another manufacturer to package, that compliance test will have to be voided. They'll have to do another one. So the distributor or manufacturer that touches the bulk last before it gets packaged can do the compliance test in bulk form. But most of the time what happens is it gets packaged and then they do the compliance test. The risk on that, when you have a compliance test, it's already submitted to the state. So if it fails for any reason, you can't redo it. And if it fails for a pesticide or mold, the state's gonna make you destroy it on camera. So the way around this is by doing an R&D test before you do the compliance test. And I'll do another video on this, the nuances of the different testing. However, by doing an R&D test, it's gonna extend your timeline a bit, but it's a safety net so you know you're not gonna get stuck with a bad compliance test. So the distributor is allowed to transport, the distributor is allowed to test, the distributor can also package, doesn't have to just be the manufacturer, the distributor can package. The distributor can also run like a wholesale showroom as well. You can have a bunch of pounds there, a bunch of liters of distillate, a bunch of raw materials, a bunch of raw goods, and sell it to other distros. And so I did this for quite a while, from 2019 to pretty much up until current times, buying bulk flower with my distro license and then selling that to other distributors and other brands. And sometimes I'll bring that to a different distributor, maybe where they'll have a showroom, say in LA, drop off my products there, and then it'll get shown in the showroom and I don't have to deal with those sales directly. Or if I have my own buyers, I can facilitate that deal as I see fit. So the distribution license gives you a lot of flexibility. The final component of the distribution license is now you're also allowed to do retail store fulfillment, which is distribution to retail stores. And so this is where you're taking the finished packaged products that's already been tested and you're distributing them to the other stores. So basically you become the delivery person. And what this retail distributor will also be responsible for is invoicing. And it sounds simple, it sounds basic, but invoicing is super important because if you don't invoice right, it could potentially offset your taxes in a not so good way. It's also how you track accounts receivable. Accounts receivable are the stores that you gave product to that haven't paid you up front. It wasn't a COD, cash on delivery order. It was on net terms is what it's called. So net terms is a very slippery slope. You want to be careful who you give net terms to. And a lot of times, your retail distributor is already gonna have a history with some of these retail stores. And they're gonna know off top if this store is good to work with, if this store is bad to work with, etc. So what I like to do before any of my sales guys extend terms to a retailer, they'll check with me first, see if I'm even comfortable with it. I'll understand the opportunity or the risk. And if it's something I wanna consider, I'll reach out either to the distributor directly, ask them, or I'll have my sales director talk to the distributor. My sales director might already know off top too. So you have all these checks and balances between your sales team, your distributor, and obviously the owner making the final decision. These distributors are potentially testing the product, potentially packaging the product, they're transporting the product, they're invoicing the product, and then they're collecting on those accounts. They're collecting that money, whether that be in cash or by an ACH transfer, whatever. So those are the basic production license types. Now the final license to talk about is retail. And you have storefront retail and you have non-storefront retail. Non-storefront retail is a delivery service. It means there's no storefront for consumers to walk into. And what happens, consumers will place their order, usually online. Sometimes the old ways of doing it was calling in the order, but I don't think there's many places that do that anymore. So the order gets placed online, it gets sent into the delivery service. They schedule that delivery same day, usually within an hour or so. And these delivery services, just like ordering a pizza, you're not gonna order from Inland Empire to get it delivered out to Hollywood. You know, you're gonna have a delivery service. It's very location based. The downside to a delivery service is you don't have foot traffic. When you have a retail store, everyone comes to you. So it's one single point, everyone's coming to you. When you have a delivery service, you're one single point that now has to go to all these people. So good foot traffic on a retail storefront where people come into the store, if you can get 400 people a day, that's a really great foot traffic. Some stores have half that. Some stores only have 200. Some stores even have 100, 150. And that's not too sustainable. So as a brand, you want to look and identify what's the amount of sell-through that these stores have per day. When I say sell-through, how many people are actually ordering from these stores, whether they order your product or not. Because whether that total amount of customers for the day is 50, whether it's 100, whether it's 400, a certain percentage of those customers are going to order your brand. So the more we get in there, if we get 400 in the store, it's a 4 times better chance you're going to sell 4 times more product than only 100 people going into the store. So foot traffic is important. And when you think about a delivery service, they don't really have foot traffic. It's going to be reliant on their marketing. And as I've mentioned in other videos, marketing is super important. You can't overlook marketing. You need marketing. However, a lot of these places do overlook on marketing. They skimp on marketing. So that's another little trick I like to do with these stores is if it's a good store to be in and they can really ramp up sales, sometimes you can, dangle a carrot in front of them and say, hey, if we hit these benchmarks on these sales within a month, I'll cover some ad spend for you on Weed Maps. And this is a way that not only are you symbiotically helping each other out, but it's encouraging that store to really push your brand. Whether that be reminding the bud tenders every day, push more of that Zodix. Or if they're working out strategies on their back end, maybe having some extra loyalty points. If you buy Zodix, you get double the amount of loyalty points, etc. So there's a lot of different angles, a lot of different ways to do different types of sales, to do different types of promos. And if your brand's a high-end brand, try to avoid doing sales. That's with Zodix, we've never been on sale, never at a store. So I don't reimburse stores for going on sales. If, say for instance, product's sitting on the shelf too long and it's not selling quick enough, I'll buy it back. I'll buy it back at wholesale, or I'll swap it out for fresh product, because I don't want them discounting my weed that's old, first of all, to just move through it. I'd rather take that hit, buy it back, and give them fresh stuff, and they sell it at regular price. So back to the retail model, you have non-storefront and you have storefront. Storefront has much bigger challenges because now you're a target. You see them all up and down California getting robbed left and right. And the strategy now is they just drive cars straight into there, come in with a line of people, break in through the front entrance with a car, and then everyone just goes in and just raids the place, just grabs what they can. And there's usually a line of cars out front. So now they're just bringing everything out, just loading it up into cars. And now there's just multiple people. It's just a line of cars and people just robbing the place hella quick. So when you have a delivery service, it's not necessarily identifiable by the public. It's usually more in a commercial warehouse somewhere, sometimes maybe located within inside of another warehouse. Some of these delivery services are actually part of, say, a distribution company or part of a manufacturing company, and they have a separate room for their delivery. So a lot of these times, these delivery services are gonna have extra layers of protection on them, because if you're just a commercial warehouse, you can really reinforce that a lot more than a storefront. And every case is different. Some storefronts you can secure a little bit easier than a warehouse. However, some of these warehouses, they have some pretty sophisticated security nowadays. And also, if you're gonna have your delivery service be part of a bigger multi-licensed facility, like with distro and manufacturing, now you're spreading your security costs across multiple licenses rather than just one. So you can have a really solid 24-hour security team there, always on call. Not even on call, but just always on watch. However, that's not a cure-all to getting robbed. There's plenty of 24-hour security that just run off when robberies happen. So it's really important to get good security. I prefer having ex-military guys to be your security, not just the cheapest security company that'll do the job. So having really good security is important. And if you have your license types spread out versus all condensed under one roof, you can absorb those costs amongst multiple license holders. So those are the key types of licenses. Now, if I had to focus on just one license, take a guess what that would be. Distribution. The reason why I chose that, and that's what I still have. I have a distribution license and there's a type 6 attached to it, but we don't use it really for anything. We don't use the manufacturing much. The distribution, we just use to procure bulk flower, and then from there transfer it to the manufacturer that's going to do the packaging, or that's if it's a distro going to do the packaging, whatever, make those transfers. If I'm selling bulk flower, transfer it from my distro to another distro. So it's not mandatory to have a license in order to have a brand. But if you are going to get into a license, the best one to get into early on is a distro license. So distro licenses are cheaper. They're the cheapest ones out of the whole list. You can get one with a small footprint. Both my distro licenses have been in small warehouses. I've been to these huge places, 10,000 square feet and bigger. But my warehouse, let's see, the first one was about 3,000, about 2,500 with the upstairs. And the second one, it's right around there, about 2,000 or so. So the point is, your square footage cost, you don't need huge space. Like if you're gonna have a cultivation facility and you have a 10,000 square foot license to grow, you're gonna need at least close to 20,000 square feet in order to max out that 10,000 square foot flowering canopy. And the reason why is because you need space for drying, you need space for your mom room, you need space for your bedroom. You're gonna need a little bit of office space. You're gonna need storage space. You're gonna need space for your water tanks. So a cultivation facility is very costly just on rent from the get-go. And we went over that. We went over the cost of these facilities. However, the cheapest cost to have a facility is gonna be your distro, because really the only requirements to get your distro set up, it's gotta be in a zoned area. And so that's why these landlords raise the rent so much, because the cities state, and that's why these landlords charge so much, because the state and the county identify certain key neighborhoods in your city where they'll allow the license to actually be placed. So you can't just get a license at your house or something. It's got to be in a specific commercial district, and then within that, it's got to be in a specific zone of that commercial district. You can't just be anywhere in that commercial district. It's almost like a lottery for the landlords, because if they just so happen to own a piece of property within this green zone, is what it's called. Green zone is where you're allowed to have a license, cannabis license. So if a landlord just happened to have a property that fell into this green zone that the city determined, it's like winning a lottery, because now he goes from charging 80, 90 cents a square foot up to $3, $4, $5 a square foot. So it's a huge influx of profit for that landlord. So these guys are really milking it for what they can. And in true honesty, out of all the license holders, the majority of profitability goes to the landlords, because no matter what, whether that license is profitable or not, the landlord's getting their money. And these license holders are basically being held by ransom, because the license is attached to that address. So if you've already sunk in hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars into your license, you're gonna do everything that you can to hold on to it. Not gonna let it slip away. You're gonna go pawn some stuff, sell some stuff, borrow whatever before you just let the license go away, because it's gonna negate everything you've done. So having these licenses is a huge burden, and the landlords are the ones that really make profit off it. Because think about it, if you're running a manufacturing license or you're running a retail distribution license, you have to do enough packaging consistently. You have to package enough pounds consistently every week, day in, day out, to keep a steady flow of income coming for that license type. But let's say you might have a good flow of clientele for a year, but then all of a sudden next year, market prices start dropping. Now manufacturers are dropping their production costs to entice more brands to come work with them. So for instance, I had a manufacturer who was packaging my flower. They were charging, all said and done, they were charging $1.30 per eighth package. That included the testing sticker, included heat sealing it. But I found a different place that's doing it for close to 80 cents. And that difference alone saved me well over, 35, 40% of what I was paying to have it packaged. It was a huge savings. However, it immediately caused me to now switch from this manufacturer to this manufacturer. So that manufacturer all of a sudden just lost business because they couldn't compete on price. So this is why I don't like owning the licenses. If you're gonna own the license, only own it if you have a profitable brand, because you don't wanna be running these licenses trying to just get people to come in to just pay you to package their flower and then be on the way. And then the next time they find someone cheaper, they're off to go work with them instead of you. So it's like you're constantly finding new clients. And this is the same for retail distribution. It's a little bit different in a sense, like clients aren't going to come and go as quick, but it's just as easy to switch over to a distro if they have a better percentage on what they're charging. Maybe if they have better abilities to collect on accounts receivable. Maybe they have better storage facilities like climate control or climate control vans. These are important aspects to take in consideration. Maybe their insurance is better, their security is better. There's many reasons why you might want to switch a distro. However, you're going to see a lot of people switch manufacturers before they switch distros. So to own a manufacturing license, it's a struggle. Even if you're extracting too, if you're doing type 7, you're making distillate, you're making shatter, you're making live resin, it's a rat race. Again, you're providing a commoditized service ultimately, because there's so many other people doing it. The market just dictates that price. Just like I said with the price of flour, the price of any farmer is going to be turned into commodity at some point or the other. It's the brand that truly makes the real profit. And then on top of that, the brand can build out loyal followers and loyal supporters so that regardless of who they're getting their packaging done through, regardless of who's distributing it, the customer knows the brand and they're going to buy that brand if they like that brand, whether XYZ distributor distributed or ABC distributor distributed it. Same for the manufacturer. They don't care who packaged it. They care about that brand. That's why I say it doesn't make sense to just jump in by getting a license. You want to build a profitable brand first and then get the licenses as a way to lower your operating costs of your brand. But do it strategically. I would start with your distro just so you have some flexibility and nimbleness. You can still package flour. You can still roll pre-rolls as long as they're not infused. So as I said, a distro license is the smartest one to get first. The only caveat to it not being is if a type 6 license makes more sense for you. So if you'd rather be making hash rather than having the distribution license, you'd rather be able to do a little bit more on the packaging side, like, fill up carts, wash your hash. So if you want to be able to do a little bit more than just package flour and roll up uninfused pre-rolls with a type 6, you can get into those other stages. You could wash hash, you could roll infused pre-rolls, you can fill up carts. So type 6 gives you a little bit more flexibility. So those are the two licenses depending on what your brand's about. What's more important to you? Is it more important to be a little bit flexible and move around, or is it more important to be able to do some of your production? And decide on that to understand what's the first license that you should get. And then from there, I would say avoid the retail licenses unless you're a retail specialist, unless you want to get into that's a whole nother grind in its own. And a lot of these retail licenses, I repeat, they're not profitable. And it's going to be years until they are profitable, if they even are profitable. I mean, some of these states, they're getting screwed over because of these hemp laws too. It's becoming easier to buy hemp, finished packaged hemp, and the quality is getting better and better on that, and this THCA flower. So if that continues to proliferate, it's going to cannibalize the licensed retailers. So I would stay away from retail license. I would stay away from cultivation license unless it's something that you're really good at and that you want to be part of. The only way I'd get into a cultivation license is with a partner that's going to operate it. And also where my brand is up enough to where I have enough of a safety net, of a cushion, to where I can still stay focused on the brand, partner with the operator for the grow. And if I do got to come out of pocket to cover expenses on the grow or setbacks, my brand's already doing good enough to where I can manage that. So you want to get into these licenses strategically, and the most strategic way to do this is to build out your brand first, get it profitable. I cannot stress that enough. It does not make sense to start by buying a license. So please don't do that. Whatever you do, just don't do that. Just start the brand first, then grow into getting a license, whether you get it all by yourself or partner. So another thing to keep in mind about these licenses is that in order to transfer from one license to another, it's got to be done through the state's track and trace system. And some of these states have different track and trace systems than others. Here in California, we have what's called METRC, METRC. And so that's our track and trace seed to sale system. So it tracks from when it's grown to then as it's trimmed, how much finished weight there is, how many finished pounds that makes. Now those pounds are in the system. Now it shows where each one of those pounds got transferred out to. From there, if those pounds get turned into packaged flour, into pre-rolls, get extracted, whatever the case may be, the METRC track and trace system is going to show that. It gets broke out into these other packages and sent to the according license. So I'll do another video specifically about track and trace and METRC, but that's just something to know that goes with this video. Is between these license types, the only way to transfer flour from one to the other, finished products from one to the other, is through a track and trace manifest. Here in California we use METRC. I know in Arizona they use one called BioTrack. I believe that's what New York is using as well now. So you have to abide by these protocols set forth by the track and trace software. So that's another thing to kind of keep in account. And you can only have access to these METRC systems if you own the license. You can't just go set up an account or something. You need a license, an active license, and it's a very thorough process for them to actually grant you a METRC account. So if I haven't stressed it enough, the value I want to leave with you today: do not get a cannabis license until you're making more than $100,000 in revenue per month and you have a grasp on why you need that license. Understand what it's going to take to actually operate that license, to get it operational if it's not operational, to buy it if it is operational. Understand the rent, understand the personal guarantee attached to that rent. But take all this into account and understand, by me getting this license, is it gonna save me a lot of money, or is it just gonna be a burden for me and take my focus away from growing my brand further? So really the only reason to get these licenses is to secure your supply chain for the brand that's already profitable. You're already doing 6 figures a month, 7 figures a year. And from there, start adding your licenses like pieces of a puzzle. And the best way is to make strategic partnerships where maybe instead of starting your own license or buying it from scratch, you buy into an active license. A lot of these license holders are struggling, and it's going to get worse and worse. These guys in New York don't know what's coming for them. They think they're king of the mountain by having all these licenses, but watch in 2, 3, 4 years, it's going to become more of a burden, and the brands are going to be the ones that are really calling the shots, that are making the real profit, that have the identifying ability to these consumers. They don't care who manufactured it. They don't care who grew it. As long as the brand puts their stamp of approval on it and it's something consistent that they expect from that brand, the brands are winning. So as I've said before, I've owned multiple distro licenses. I currently have one I'm part of that's a distro and type 6 license in the same building. And then I also owned a licensed cultivation facility for 3.5 years, which I sold. And when I sold it, it was a huge burden off my shoulders. And I got out of a $1.5 million personal guaranteed lease. I was able to exit out of the grow. It was a great experience. Would never trade it for anything because it got me to where I'm at today. But it put me through tons and tons of very unique challenges that thankfully I was able to overcome. And it's made me who I am today and gave me the unique perspective that I have on the market. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, is the burden that a license has, especially if you don't know it. If you go in thinking you're gonna become multi-millionaire just because you own these licenses, it's not like an alcohol license. It's not. You know how alcohol licenses have value? You can just sell that piece of paper and it has value. It doesn't work like that with cannabis licenses. The only place that happens is Florida and Nevada. And it's because they rolled out their programs properly. But Arizona is way over licensed. California is over licensed. We'll see how New York does it. Michigan, there's a lot of overproduction there. Prices are at an all-time low. Even though you hear per capita, Michigan's the largest adult market. But if you, instead of looking at per capita, look at gross volume of revenue, it's nowhere near. So kind of rambled on a bit, but I hope this is all insight for you. This is coming from my personal experiences, my personal observations, and being on the ins and outs of all this, owning brands, having shut down brands, having successful brands, owning cultivation, owning distro licenses, having current licenses right now that I barely use. Like I said, it's just for the flexibility of it. It's not needed for the brand. So just strategize. Your funds are your lifeline. Cash flow is your lifeline in this industry. So don't tie it up by just trying to get into a license because you think you need a license. Instead, use that cash flow, reinvest it into your brand, build that brand as robust and scaled up as possible, and kill it. So you know how it goes. I got a link below this video. If you want to work with me, click the link. It'll break down everything. Schedule a call with me. We'll get on the phone. We'll see if it makes sense. Thanks for watching.